everyone. My name is Antti Knutas from LUT University, and I will be your host today. And with us, we'll have our today's guest, Dr. Margit Hofer from Centrum for Social Innovation, and she's been a big part of the DoIt project, and her work concerns research on innovation in different systems, and she'll also has brought this perspective to DoIt. And today's topic is requirements in rural areas or pop-up makerspaces. And could you tell us briefly what a makerspace means to you and how you have worked with these pop-up spaces?
Mm-hmm. So the makerspaces for me personally is where you give a free room to children in the DoIt. It was basically for the children that they can create and can develop prototypes and ideas. First, of course, ideas for specific challenges and issues they see. And this is an important part. So we are not taking up our problems or issues, but we need to have the perspective of the users and identify what are their needs and what are their challenges. And starting from that point, we support the kids or the makers to find ideas or solutions and then sort of developing prototypes or even products. So that would be a sort of one, I would say, limited definition how I would see a makerspace, especially in the DoIt project.
What kind of benefits would you see in a makerspace compared to traditional classroom education?
Oh, okay. This is like I would say it's a very different approach. In a traditional schools, not talking about Finnish schools, one has to know that the school systems in Europe is very, very different. And especially in the Nordic countries, you have a very open school system. You have many projects, and students have quite a lot of freedom to choose their topics and their interests and get educated in that part. That's not the case for southern school systems. So usually they have a curriculum and they follow the curriculum. They have this right and wrong system in schools. So this is right, this is wrong. And a makerspace is a totally different approach. Basically, you go there and you do what is your interest, basically. You don't have a curriculum, but it's sort of where you have a space where you develop your own ideas and your own approaches. And what is very important in a makerspace is also the mentality, I would say. So it's extremely important that you have an understanding that it's good if you fail, that you test and experiment, and that if you fail, that you understand it brings you forward. So at least you know what is not correct and how you have to do it, and that the understanding that you have to do it differently. So the more you test and experiment, the better your product would be. And usually the schools do not necessarily provide this space or this room because the curriculum is so tight. However, a makerspace in this respect would give a student much more room and freedom to develop and be creative and understand also his or her own abilities. And in a schooling system, you have quite a lot of a strict line where you have to follow, basically. So that's a sort of totally different approach, I would think, especially for the southern educational systems.
I see, and that's something that we even struggle at university level, like how to go from this transferring knowledge to actually giving agency to the students so that they can learn how to work in real life.
And what it was quite interesting, what we have seen is that in a makerspace, it's much more easier to work with the smaller kids in this respect. So they're used to play, and from their natural, they play and they construct and they do things. And the older students are already so much stuck in their schooling system that they always look at you and say, okay, is that correct what I do? And we tell them, it's fine what you do, just do it. And if you fail, that's okay, then you do it differently. So it's difficult for older systems to drag them away from this thinking am I correct or am I not correct? And smaller kids, they're more like, okay, I do it again, and I do it this way. They think a little bit more unconventional still.
That sounds really great. And my understanding is that you have been working also with this rural or pop-up makerspaces, like outside the city center. So what kind of special conditions or challenges have you had in setting up those?
I think in the rural areas, it's more that you have to be very well prepared in terms of what material do you offer, what do you bring with you? Because if I'm in a town or in a city and I realize, okay, I don't have sufficient LEDs, I simply go to the next shop and I buy some. If you're in a rural area, then you have 1.5 hour drive to get some LEDs, and that's like not possible, obviously. So in terms of material organization, you need to be very well organized, let's put it this way. I think what is also, in some respect, I find it much more easier to work in a rural area, especially when you live in this area. So usually you would know your target group better. In the pilot we have been doing, basically you know the kids who are coming, and the group is in a way possibly much more homogeneous than if you have an open call in a town. If you are living in a town, then all types of kids might come. Depends how you do the call. If I have a call here, I know what kids sort of do come. It's a very small school where we did the call. So it's the primary school has 150 students, which is not a big school. So basically, and the kids are more. I mean, everybody's individual, of course, and everybody brings his or her own story. But still, in a way, if you approach a topic, you know approximately how the kids might think about that. Let's put it this way. In some respect, I also find it more easy because when we invited other people to view the prototypes, or when you need some input from outsiders, I know whom I have to call. So it was easy in a way to organize people from outside to come. So it was easy, as an example, to ask the CEO from the local electricity provider to come and talk with those kids who did some prototypes, which is connected with their prototype and with their topic. It was easy to get the mayors. It was easy to get the press. So, if you don't know anybody, you for sure know somebody who would know somebody.
Yeah.
So I think it's easy to get outsiders in school because it's still something special. I think in town, many people have these requests, so they might be more hesitant to join. And of course, it's like personal contacts you might also have. So I think it's a big advantage if you organize something in a rural area. It's a big advantage to have a local there who's very well connected. So that's an absolute huge plus if you have somebody who's really local.
Yeah. Did you find it easy to find space in a smaller school to set up everything? And were there any organizational challenges there?
Yes, it is a challenge. And that's also the reason why you have to start very early to organize these basics. So you need to have a proper room. And especially with the makerspaces, you have to see that you have really a lot of space. So the more space you have, the better it is, because then, especially when you have young kids, you also need to have they need to have possibly more breaks. They're not that focused sometimes because they're still much younger than a 12 or 15-year-old. So we started very, very early to organize the room. And we were talking with the mayor, we were talking with the school director, and finally we decided we do it at school, but in summer holidays still. So we had like the entire schoolhouse for us, including the outside playground, which we also used. And we really were all over the house. And that was great for the kids. So they also, because one has to consider they have very intense working phases, and kids are very young. Then you need to get them out sometime, and you see when they're getting sort of unfocused or unconcentrated, then you need to get them out. And then it's great if you have a lot of space, and that is not that easy in rural areas. So to find like big rooms and more rooms, so you need to plan very well in advance. And I would guess that's much more easier in towns where you have lots of offers or where you can rent rooms.
Yeah. We covered a lot of basic challenges and benefits you can achieve with this kind of approach. But finally, what kind of advice or lessons learned would you still add to a person who has a makerspace or a hack lab and would like to take it mobile, like where to start and what to consider in addition to these things we already covered?
Yeah. Summarizing it up, I think you have to know very well your target group. So get to know who will come. I think it's extremely important to have a sort of a good agenda in your head. So what do you want to achieve with the kids? But then still be extremely flexible, because that's an important part. So be very aware that you are facilitating and that you are not sort of the master of the product, but that's the key, basically. A very good organization, for the materials, but also for the facilitators. Do bring sufficient number of facilitators with you. That's a very important part, I think, independent if you're in a rural area or if you are working in a town. But having sufficient facilitator is a key point, really, especially when you work with young kids. Do you have another advice? Well, also address girls.
Right.
What we have seen, especially in the rural area, that was quite interesting. What we have seen is that these makerspaces seem to be extremely attractive for boys. And especially in the rural areas, we understood that the percentage of boys who would come is higher than for the girls. So especially if in a rural area, try also to get the girls. When the girls are there, they seem to work very fine and they work very focused also, what we have been hearing from the interviews. But especially in the rural areas, it's interesting to have the girls also, and possibly specifically address also the girls with the calls as an example. That's an advice. Other than that, well, we are preparing the report now. There's a lot of insights in very small details. So, but that's, I would say, that really the basics if you do a makerspace.
I think this is something really valuable and information package, and we'll for sure have to link to the report when it comes out on our DoIt website. So thank you so much for your time, Margit, and we'll hope to see you in further events eventually.
Very good. Thanks a lot for your time, and thanks for the interview. Okay, bye.
Bye.